Most people learn about the American Revolution as a battle between the Patriots and the British, George Washington versus King George. But that version of history leaves out thousands of people who played a massive role, yet barely get mentioned. And today we're pulling back the curtain on one of the revolution's biggest secrets: the African soldiers who fought, bled, and in many cases died for a freedom they were never fully promised. Let me take you back to the 1770s. America wasn't a country yet. It was a cluster of colonies built on labor, and a huge part of that labor came from enslaved Africans. When war broke out, nearly 500,000 black people were living in these colonies, most of them enslaved, and suddenly, both sides, the colonists and the British, realized they needed manpower. This war was going to be long, brutal, and expensive, and manpower wins wars. That's where Africans enter the story. Both sides used African soldiers, but for very different reasons. The British went first. In 1775, Lord Dunmore, the royal governor of Virginia, made a bold move. He issued a proclamation promising freedom to any enslaved African who escaped their colonial enslavers and joined the British Army. This was explosive. Freedom was the one thing enslaved Africans had been denied their entire lives, and suddenly the world's most powerful empire was offering it. Thousands escaped. They ran at night, hid in forests, crossed rivers, escaped in groups or alone, all hoping to reach the British lines and take hold of the promise of freedom. Many succeeded. They formed a unit called Lord Dunmore's Ethiopian Regiment. And yes, that was the real name. These soldiers wore sashes that read, "Liberty to Slaves." They fought directly against the very colonists who claimed they were fighting for their own freedom. Once the colonists heard about this, they panicked. If enslaved Africans kept escaping to the British, the colonists would lose workers, lose their economy, and lose the war. So, the Patriots quickly changed their strategy. At first, George Washington didn't want black soldiers in his army, but reality forced his hand. By 1776, he reversed his position and allowed free Africans, and eventually enslaved Africans, to fight for the Patriot cause. So now you had Africans on both sides of the war, all fighting for the same thing, freedom. But the promises they were given were completely different. Let's talk about some of the African heroes you never hear about. Start with Crispus Attucks, the first person killed in the Boston Massacre, the spark that lit the American Revolution. Attucks, a man of African and indigenous descent, is literally the first casualty in America's fight for independence. Think about that. The revolution's first blood wasn't white. It was a man who was never included in the "all men are created equal" line. Then there's Peter Salem, an enslaved man from Massachusetts. He fought at the Battle of Bunker Hill and famously shot and killed British Major John Pitcairn, the same officer who ordered the first shots at Lexington and Concord. Without Salem's shot, the outcome of that battle would have been very different. Another forgotten soldier is Salem Poor, also at Bunker Hill. His bravery was so undeniable that 14 colonial officers signed a petition demanding he be recognized for heroism. That was rare, extremely rare, for a black man in 1775. More than 20,000 Africans fought for the British, and around 5,000 fought for the Patriots. Many Africans chose the British because the promise of freedom seemed more reliable, and in many cases, it was. When the war ended and America won, the British evacuated thousands of black soldiers and their families to Nova Scotia, the Caribbean, and even back to Britain. Some later went to Sierra Leone and built brand new lives as free people. Meanwhile, on the American side, many black Patriot soldiers received broken promises. Some got their freedom, yes, but many did not. Their service was forgotten, erased, or buried. In some cases, enslavers took back their slaves after the war, pretending the verbal agreements of battlefield freedom never happened. There were African women involved too, helping in camps, carrying supplies, healing the wounded, and sometimes even fighting disguised as men. Their names rarely survived in official records, but their work kept armies alive. Every time people talk about the American Revolution as a simple battle of redcoats versus patriots, they erase the thousands of Africans who were there, on both sides, shaping the outcome. Without them, the war would have been longer, bloodier, and possibly lost. So the next time someone tells the story of America's fight for freedom, remind them, Africans were not just bystanders. They were soldiers, liberators, fighters, and they carried a dream of freedom long before the nation they fought for ever honored it. And if you want to understand how that fight became even more complicated across Africa and the Caribbean, then you need to see my video on how colonization really happened